are listening to the Home Studio Simplified podcast. Welcome back to the Home Studio Simplified podcast. This is episode number 58. In today's episode, we're going to have an interview with Jesse from syncmymusic.com. If you've ever wondered what sync licensing is or how to break into this area of the music business, today's podcast will greatly help you. Before we get into today's podcast, this podcast is sponsored by the Pro Mix Academy. The Pro Mix Academy offers affordable courses from mentors, world-class engineers, Grammy winners, and multi-platinum selling producers. And with the resources available on the Pro Mix Academy, you can learn how to create radio-ready mixes from the comfort of your own home studio. Most of the courses also offer multi-tracks that you can then add to your portfolio and begin to build out your business. Follow the link in the description of this podcast to head on over to the Pro Mix Academy today and start learning the skills that are needed to take your hobby or your business to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Home Studio Simplified channel. If this is your first time here, so glad that you're here. If you're a frequent HSS frequenter, so glad to have you back as well. You guys are awesome. I love each and every one of you. You know that you have helped to formulate this community into what it is. And today we have a very special show lined up for you. You know, I'm always trying to help people. For those of you that don't know, though, the whole basis of this channel exists to simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space. And the motto that we have around here is that you can dream alone and you can even create alone. And a lot of times we do, but together we can achieve so much more. When you begin to reach out and formulate communities and start to formulate bonds and networks with other individuals, you're always going to find yourself growing more than if you're just an island unto yourself. With that, also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to some individuals who have helped to make this channel a success, and that is the HSS chart toppers. So thank you each and every one of you who have donated either through the Super Chat feature or if you're a monthly Patreon pledge member. Thank you all so much. You guys rock. And to be honest, when I first started this channel, I never thought we would get to this day where we were able to get income generated from this, to give stuff away and to have, you know, free courses given out, things like this. So you guys are just awesome. So without further ado, today's episode title is in and of itself a variety of a topic that I have had many questions about, one that I have personally been very curious about myself. And we have what I feel like is sort of an industry leader on this here today. I've watched a lot of his YouTube channel videos. You have to go and check him out. He is just, main thing that I took away from him is he's just a very down-to-earth individual. He's not trying to sell you a bag of goods that's not going to actually reproduce anything on the end for you. So we're going to be talking today with Jesse Josefsson of syncmymusic.com. That is a website that's devoted to helping musicians just like yourself discover the world of sync licensing for TV and film as a means to actually make a side income or even go full-time as a music producer. Now, Jesse's had his placements on the Discovery Channel, CNN, Disney, the Travel Channel, and that's just to name a few. He's very graciously stopped by here today to share with you his knowledge, as well as to help you get a grasp on how you could actually benefit from this sync licensing world as an ambitious musician. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our guest today, Jesse Josefsson. Good to have you, buddy.
Good to be here, Robert. Thank you so much for inviting me, man. It's really awesome. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be able to share this really cool information with producers and musicians that are looking to do other things with their music besides the more traditional routes. So I'm really happy to be here, man. Awesome.
And we do have quite a few questions here today, but I'm going to try to be mindful of Jesse's time. And but the main thing that I just want to sort of kickstart all of this off of, because a lot of people aren't even aware that this is a thing, is what exactly is sync licensing? If you could just kind of encapsulate that.
You're absolutely right. I think if you guys are watching this video right now, you are probably in a 5% minority of producers and musicians that even know that this is a potential source of income for you. Sync licensing simply is music, songs, recordings getting placed into content and various types of content, movies, TV shows, commercials, promos, even radio commercials, you name it, streaming sites, anything where there is content, it can be audio or video, where there needs to be a music placement behind it, or in the foreground, it can be sort of the feature. That is just called a synchronization placement, a synchronization license.
Awesome. So what exactly got you specifically started into sync licensing? Like, how did you find out about this, and what made you think like this is something I want to gravitate to?
So probably like most of you guys, when I was much younger, I had a band, and I was very sure we were going to be the next, I think, Linkin Park or Gym Class Heroes. We had, maybe Fall Out Boy. We were very sure. We had a pretty decent opportunity. We were working with Tyrese Gibson, who is the R&B artist and actor. He had a little production company back in the day. He signed us. So we were like, wow, like, okay, he's not a label, he's a production company, but I mean, he's Tyrese, and Transformers was just coming out. So we thought, all right, this guy's just going to walk us in the door of any major label, and we got a deal. Very arrogant and very young of us to think that way. It didn't work out, unfortunately. It was a great opportunity, but in the course of being in that situation, we were introduced to many just people. We were in LA and just kind of meeting people all the time. And one of the people that we met was an owner of a music library. And he pulled us in and said, hey, you guys got some great music. I think we might be able to get you guys some placements. He was showing us that he had made, I think he had over, was it 10,000 placements at the time? He was showing us his royalties. He was like, this is like a real thing. You can get placements on TV and you get paid for it. So it was sort of like a first class, like front row seat to like, whoa, it just blew my mind. I went to college for 4 years, studied recording arts, studied music business. Guess how many days I learned about sync licensing? 0. Right. Nobody ever taught me about this stuff. Never even was exposed to it. Didn't even know the name of it. It was just crazy how I spent that much money and time on education. And it took me going to LA and just being in the business to actually learn this stuff. So unfortunately, as a band, we decided it's not really for us, because this library needed to take control of our publishing. And we can talk about that. It's a very common deal structure when you work with music libraries. So as a band, we're trying to be rock stars, and giving up our publishing to a music library didn't make sense for our strategy. So we decided as a band, no thanks. Thank you, but no thanks. But I had, I guess, some wisdom to stay behind a little bit after the meeting and say, hey, man, I know as a band, probably not the right thing for us, but I like to make music. I wasn't good at the time. I was terrible. But I like to craft my own little beats and tracks. I was using my little Apple MacBook computer. And I said, hey, can I maybe throw you some beats? Like, are you cool with just instrumental tracks? He's like, oh, absolutely. That's pretty much mostly what we do. I was like, okay, I'll throw you a couple and let me know if it's good enough. And if not, maybe you can help me get better or whatever. Or if not, just let me know how I can improve and I'll try again. And he really just sort of took me under his wing and gave me my first contract. I remember I got a couple of, they call them consideration fees, which is basically sometimes a library will pay you a little bit up front just to say, thank you for letting us exclusively distribute your music. And I remember it was like a $500 check, and it was the first time really that I'd ever been paid for my music. And I was just like on cloud 9 for months after that. Like, I mean, it wasn't enough to even pay my rent, but it was still like, wow, like this is really a thing that can happen. You can put music into the world and get a check from it, And so that basically started my path to learning really how this business worked. Now, I made tons and tons of mistakes along my way. So hopefully in this interview, we can talk about those, because the reason why I started Sync My Music here is because I don't want you guys to make the same crappy, terrible, thoughtless mistakes that I did, because I could have obviously burned out many times. And I pretty much felt like burning out so many times because this is not easy. I don't want you guys to think that this is just all, throw your music out into the world and it all comes back to you and it's super easy. It's tough. It's hard. It's for a certain type of producer. And there are a lot of mistakes you can make along the way if you really don't have just a fundamental understanding of this industry. It's not rocket science. I will make it very clear for you guys. It's not going to be so complex that you got to go get a 4-year degree to understand it. You can learn it literally in a couple of days, maybe even in one day. But you do need to understand that I do recommend you learn it from somebody at least who's been in the industry, because there's a lot of people out there that do talk about this business that have never stepped foot in it. And they're giving you secondhand knowledge from other books or videos or something else they've seen. I've been in the trenches for 12 years, so I know how this business works and I know how tough it can be. So hopefully we can get into some of those topics so you guys can avoid those mistakes and not, almost burn out like I almost did.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that aspect of it, because one of the major things that I push around here is sort of similar to what you've said. There's so many varying opinions out there, and there's so many voices in the world that are given information. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not a a be all end all as well. I'm not someone who, even props myself up as that. That's why I'm having individuals like yourself and Warren Hewart and other individuals on here all the time to sort of accentuate my weaknesses, or even to tell my audience about things like this that I just recently started really hearing about. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on, because I seen, as I was watching your channel, you're not someone who is putting yourself out there as I am the only one with all the information. You have to go through me, buy my courses, buy my stuff. I didn't get that sort of sleazy car salesman thing from you. I was like, this is a genuine individual who's really trying to help people. And that's what I'm all about here. So I'm so glad that I brought you on. And before we get into sort of the who's it for and who's it not, so how does sync licensing actually work before we get into like who's it for and who's it not?
Great question. There are so many ways that you can get into this business. Now, the way that I got into this business is working directly with music libraries. Okay. So real briefly, music libraries are essentially companies. They act as publishers. And what they do is they gather large collections of tracks. Sometimes it's 10,000. It can be 40,000, 100,000. There's smaller boutique companies that specialize in smaller, clients. And there's the bigger ones out there that they basically gobble up other catalogs. So they have literally like collections of catalogs, like just tons and tons of music out there. Their job, their sole purpose in life is to basically go out to the TV industry, to film industry, to trailer houses, to people putting commercials together, ad agencies, anybody who has content like we talked about before, and pitch them their music to say, hey, you're putting together this. You got some, sneaker commercials coming out for Nike. You probably need some great original, awesome music for that. Or you got a reality show about, people living in the South and living out of, shacks or something like that. You probably need some cool bluegrass, Southern, kind of dirty rock music or something like that. We've got you covered there. That's basically what they do. Now, my job, and maybe your job, if you guys want to follow in my footsteps, is to do one thing. Supply high quality licensable music to that library or to those libraries. Okay. And that's what's really cool about the way that I've done it is I don't have to go wine and dine. I don't have to go pitch my music to people. I don't have to do a lot of networking and flying around. I mean, back in the day when we actually had networking events, but you don't have to do really much of any of that because all of this stuff is really online. You can really just send emails to people. You can send them social media contacts, library owners, that kind of thing. And that's how I got into every library that I've worked with. There's literally an email or a Facebook message. That's literally it. And your music speaks for itself. So if you come to them and you have a good pitch, a very custom pitch and a very tailored pitch, like not spammed, right? We don't want to send the same tracks to 20 different companies and go, hey, somebody will like it. Let's see what sticks. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot and you're going to be making enemies very quickly if you do that, because if you send it to, even if you just say you send one album that you have to 3 different companies, well, what if 2 or even all 3 of them come back to you and say, we love your music, we'd love to sign you? Well, so who do you want to disappoint right away, right? That's who you get to choose. So I'm going to disappoint 2 of you guys and tell you that I bait and switched you, that I told you I had an album, but I'm actually going to give it to this other company and you guys don't get it. So there are a lot of companies to work with, but there's not enough to make enemies out of, especially not that quickly in your career. So definitely having a smart approach, and we can talk about how to do that. So that's one way to get started, is to work directly with libraries. And that's what I've recommended to my students because it's just what I've known. The other approach, which I don't see as very feasible, is going directly to music supervisors. Now, I know that a lot of people say that you can do this and it works out, and I know it has worked out for some producers. I'm not going to say it hasn't. But I'll try to make a very quick case why I think directly pitching to music supervisors is just not smart. I don't think it puts the odds of success not in your court, not in your favor. First of all, how many emails do you think music supervisors are getting every day? Dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds, right? Because they're out there, they're on LinkedIn. And if you've been looking for music placements, you've been looking, who are the music supervisors out there? There's lists out there, there's directories out there. People know who they are. They know how to get a hold of them, right? So, and these are usually just one man or one woman operations. They don't have a staff of people to, gather and screen all these submissions and these like LinkedIn messages they're getting. It's just one dude, it's one girl, that's it. So right off the bat, do you want to be 1 out of 100 messages they receive on a Tuesday and hope that gets through to their attention, that they'll actually not only click on your message, but then go click on your music and listen to it? Already, your chances are very, very limited. Music libraries, on the other hand, are always interested most of the time in bringing on new composers because a lot of composers flake out, they burn out, they leave, and then they need to replace them with somebody else. So it does happen a lot where they need to have somebody new come on board. And a lot of times they're also just looking for new talent all the time. And they have staffs. They usually have people that their whole job is, hey, you listen to new music. If it's good, you sign them to our company. That's what their whole job is. So they're set up for that kind of thing. Secondly, was back to music supervisors. Even if you're one out of 30, 50 people to get through their inbox, your music has to be the right style, the right tempo, the right emotion, the right sonic sort of quality, and it has to be the right fit for their particular project that they're working on right now. And usually they're going to work on one project at a time. A supervisor, it takes up so much of their time. And not only do all of those things have to line up, but not only does a supervisor have to say yes to it, the supervisor usually isn't the ultimate be-all, say-all of who gets the placement. They have to pass it on to the producer, and then the producer has to pass it up to the director, and then the director gets up to the executive producer or whatever. It goes up this whole chain, and there's usually like 10 people that have to say yes to your track. So let's say you go through all of those hoops, and you just happen to be that lucky person that swims through all of that stuff, and you nail that placement. Great. Now, when your next placement's ready, when you want to get your next placement, guess what you got to do? You don't get to just start there. You got to go right back to the beginning. You got to go now through, maybe now this supervisor has your contacts, so you can get to them. But again, your music has to be the right genre, the right fit, exactly perfect for whatever they happen to be working on at that given time. With libraries, they have a collection of clients that they serve. So there could be 20 supervisors with 20 different projects and many different other ones that do reality TV shows and trailers and ads, right? So your music might not be right for just that one client over here, but guess what? There might be 19 others. You're increasing your chances that your music might be useful for them. So it's really a numbers game. You really got to have sort of like as many clients looking at your tracks as possible. That's what I think makes more sense.
Man, it is crazy how much knowledge you've got about all this stuff, just considering the fact that almost probably 80% of the people that I've reached out to even try to talk to about this stuff is like, it's almost like they kind of like try to hoard the knowledge, it seems as if. And then there's one individual in particular I remember talking to that he was just like honestly telling me, he's like, honestly, I'm just winging it right now. I'm probably not the best person to even talk to about this. So just you kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of this right now is really opening up my eyes to some things. And hopefully those in the chat here, Zave Ryan says, hey, Jesse, enjoying being a part of the Sync Academy. We got Ben Grauer, Michael R, Country T, looks like Mark George is in here. Some individuals who have already submitted music for the song contest in the last few months that I definitely know are going to benefit from this. And seeing how you've sort of touched on the inner workings, the back end of this, now let's get more into that question of, okay, so who is this? Who's sync licensing for and who's it not for?
Absolutely. So right off the bat, it is for the producer that obviously first and foremost has to be able to create their own tracks. Okay. If you cannot create your own tracks or you don't know how to use the DAW yet, I definitely encourage you to just go learn. It's not that hard. I know it's hard in the beginning. It gets easier. Please try to have some faith in yourself. There's plenty of tutorials. I'm sure you, Robert, have some great tutorials or can point people in those directions. Learn how to produce your own music. So you first off need to have that. If you're like a songwriter or a vocalist and you want to get involved with this, I would say, and you have like literally just no interest in learning, how to use Logic Pro or something like that, you definitely need to go partner with a producer. So that would be one thing you need to do so that you can create, you maybe supply the song ideas, maybe if you're a vocalist, you're a lyricist, whatever it is. And then you need to partner with somebody that can be a self-contained, basically a one-man or one-woman band. You need to be able to produce your own music, mix it and master it yourself from your home studio. And it's very possible. I am not an audio whiz. I did go to college, but I did not become a mastering engineer. I did not become a mixing engineer. I've never been hired professionally a day in my life for those services. But my tracks have been placed on network shows and on cable shows and on international placements and all over the place. Okay. So you don't have to have that formal training. You don't have to have, a multi-million-dollar home studio setup and I mean, this room I'm in is not acoustically treated, and I've never worked in an acoustically treated room. I know Robert would probably shoot me for that. I know you teach them how to do that kind of stuff, but I've never done that kind of stuff, and it's really, for me and for sync licensing, it's not necessary. Of course, it's a nice bonus. You're going to have a much cleaner environment to listen to your mixes in if you do that stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, are your tracks high quality and what I call licensable, which I don't know if it's a real word, but I've invented it. And licensable means that it's standing up to the standards of the library that you're working with, meaning have you researched the music that's in the library's catalog, and do your tracks follow in their format, right? Are you about the same length as theirs? Because if they're doing 1.5 minute tracks and you send them a 6 minute track, is that licensable? Is that necessary? Not really, right? So, and if they're only doing trailer music and then you send them a hip hop track, is that really licensable for them? No, not really, because they don't have any clients that need hip hop music. Probably not. I mean, you should do your research. So making sure that obviously it's high quality, that you're using sonic samples that are modern, fresh. You're not just going to the stock sounds that came with your MIDI keyboard or with your DAW if they are, like an old one. And obviously investing a little bit in making sure that you have really high quality sounds. Now, in terms of the mindset or the sort of attitude that it takes, the first thing is delayed gratification. So this is not get rich quick. This is not an opportunity for you to think that you're going to release one album and have full-time income with sync licensing. I've heard of amazing miracle stories of even some of my students that nailed, $25,000 upfront sync fees, like within a month or two of getting into this business. But that's not the norm. Okay. And I wish everybody the best. I don't want to limit your beliefs in yourself and what you can really do. I hope you guys, do really, really well very quickly. But just know that that's the exception to the rule. The more common story is basically a 2 to 4 or maybe even a 5 year span of time where you're not being paid much of anything and maybe not anything at all. So that's why delayed gratification, that might have scared off maybe a quarter of the viewers right now, which is okay. I want to make sure you guys know that's what it takes. Okay. This is not something that you just show up like you do at a job, get paid every 2 weeks, and you just keep working. We're talking about passive income. We're basically building up in this industry a large collection of high quality licensable tracks with reputable companies. And we are sort of watching that grow over the year. That's what this is for. So if you can think about your life in terms of I'm doing this for the next 20 or 30 or maybe even 50 years of my life, then thinking about committing a couple of years in the beginning to not having any income, but just like hustling, it doesn't seem like a huge issue. But I think a lot of people on day one, they have this false expectation that they're going to get, on the first royalty check, they're going to have $10,000 coming into their bank account. And when that doesn't happen, they think, oh my God, I just wasted a whole year and I got nothing to show for it. That was one of my biggest mistakes, is when I got my first royalty check. It took me about 1.5 years. It was for 14 cents and it was for, I forgot the network, but Kirstie Alley was the actress in it. Lifetime. It was for a Lifetime network show. And I remember thinking, I did get a couple of checks here and there from the library, but I was thinking, I just spent 1.5 years of my life for 14 cents in royalties. Was this just the biggest waste of my life ever? Like, what's going on with this? And it's because nobody had walked me through that. Even the library owner I'd worked with didn't really prepare me for that, to say, hey, just so you know, you'll probably be very disappointed in the first couple of royalty checks. And that is normal. That's actually a sign. Believe it or not, people think that's a sign of failure. That's a sign of success, because that's pretty much how it works for everybody. You have to slowly sort of wet your beak here. You got to kind of slowly start to get those placements, and music editors and supervisors slowly start to understand and get familiar with you and your music. And then as time goes on, they go, you know what? I like this guy's tracks. It always works for my TV show. I'm going to put him on a short list. And every time I go to that show, I'm just going to throw that track in there all the time. So it takes time to get to that point. So I'll make sure you guys know that delayed gratification, got to have that. You got to have that sort of long-term thinking, that you're not looking for something right now. You're looking to build something in the long term, and creating music on a consistent basis, right? We cannot in this business go, well, I felt like making music last month, but this month I'm just kind of in a funk, so I'm not doing it anymore. You will get burned out of this business so quickly. You will get replaced, and libraries will replace it. As I said before, a lot of producers do find themselves in that position. So finding ways and methods to keep yourself motivated and locked into the creative process, because you're a professional, right? We're not doing this for a hobby. I mean, I teach people if they want to do this full time. You can obviously do this as a hobby. You can do this just for part-time, whatever you feel for yourself. But I really do kind of pride myself on trying to teach people skills and knowledge that can get them to full-time income. And that's what's hard about this, is showing up every day, especially those days when you don't want to.
Very, very good. Very good. And one thing that I do want to point out is the fact that I know Jesse said, his room is not acoustically treated and all of this. That's one of the things that I actually on this channel sort of preach more, I believe, than any other channel online. The fact that you don't have to have the perfect space. And what you see behind me on the wall here, I've made that. That's not even, and 9 times out of 10, I'm using these. And that's like taboo. You don't ever use headphones. You got to use studio monitors. I've got studio monitors sitting here that I've used a handful of times just to check my tracks out. But 9 times out of 10, I'm always on headphones because I trust these headphones. So what Jesse is saying is you got to have a long-term mindset. You got to have grit, determination, and it doesn't necessarily matter so much about what you have right now to get started. Just start doing it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but does it really hurt or hinder you to start submitting things right off the bat, or do you feel like you need to kind of sort of go through sort of some steps first, like to know, like, what do I submit and how do I submit it?
Yes, I do recommend you do a little bit of research. You do take a little bit of time to understand what you're getting involved with here. I know everybody watching this, I know that you think your tracks are perfect for TV. And I know that because everybody I talk to says, you know what, everybody thinks my tracks would be great on a commercial and this and that. And I know, and it's awesome. It's good to believe in yourself. It's good to have people around us that support us. But chances are the people that are telling you that are not in the sync licensing business. Okay, so they're just being loving and supportive, which is good. And I appreciate that. And that's really good. You should appreciate that too. But that is not professional advice. Okay, so that's just somebody trying to be nice and be encouraging. So I do recommend before you put together music and submit, and even start, I would say even before you even start making music for sync licensing, you go do a little bit of deep diving into the kinds of libraries that you want to partner with. And obviously, if you want to learn about how the business works, you can come to my channel, check out, I have tons of tutorials on all that kind of stuff. That's probably the best way for you to actually figure out how this business works. I think I do a pretty decent job of explaining the sort of ins and outs of it. But definitely getting a sort of a bird's eye view of how this business works and what are all the moving parts. But then I think the first thing you should do is go do your library research. Go find out which companies do I want to work with? Why would I want to work with these particular companies? Are they reputable? Do they have a track record of getting placements? And then obviously look at their catalog and listen to their music, because almost every library will have a publicly available catalog that you can go listen to. And then the hard part is being honest with yourself to say, okay, what is my strength, right? I know a lot of us also think that we can do 20 different genres. I'm not limited by one genre, man. I can do them all. Sorry to be a bubble burster. You can't. You really can't. I've never really met anybody that's equally great at 10 different genres. Usually, 99% of the time, there's probably a couple of avant-garde, geniuses out there. But most of the time, for all of us regular people, there's probably one genre that we're great at, maybe two. But for me, when I got started, it was rock. I mean, I just was in rock bands. Always, I'm a drummer and I play guitar, so I was just a rock dude. So find out first what that is in you. Are you a hip hop producer? Do you like orchestral music? Is it pop? Is it EDM? And just own it. That's fine. Great. And it's fine. Any of those genres are licensable. The only things that I think aren't that licensable are like very obscure things, like maybe experimental music or something, wild, like polka music or, something like that. Probably not a lot like that, but almost anything that is charting on a Billboard chart can get placements, including obviously orchestral music, minimal music, that kind of stuff. So then go find, where are these libraries? What do their music sound like? And then obviously the hardest part is being honest with yourself. Are my tracks up to par with what I'm hearing here? And this is where we can be delusional and we can think that our tracks are really at 9, but our tracks are really at a 4. And the tracks we're listening to are at a 9. And I'm guilty of this because when I first got started, I knew in some deep place in my brain, I knew that my music wasn't as good as what I was hearing out there, but I was in denial about it. I was like, yeah, but I'd make excuses. Yeah, but they have probably better studios. They've got this, they've got that. I'd always just make these stories up as to why mine weren't measuring up. And that was really a waste of time. What I should have done is just said, you know what? I'm at a 4. They're at a 9. I better go do some work. I just need to improve my craft. I'm not a bad producer, and I believe in myself. I know I can get to that 9, but I should just go practice, go get some help, go get some training, whatever it is, and get better at this before I submit my tracks. Because I can tell you another big mistake that I made. I like how these are just like weaving in here naturally. It's great. One of the biggest mistakes I made was that I submitted tons of music in the first couple of years that have never gotten placements to this day. They are sitting on a library's shelf collecting digital dust, and they've been there since 2008. Bad stuff. Some of them got placements, and I did really well, but a lot of them did not, and that's because I was submitting well before I was really ready to do that. I was just going, cool, you'll take my music? Great, right? I felt like I was being successful. Getting into a library, believe it or not, is not the hardest thing to do in the world. What was more tricky is making them music that they will have flying off their shelf, and that's what you really want in this business.
So a couple of questions that have arose out of what you've just told us thus far is, one, do you actually lose the rights to your music? And then for two, where do you find these libraries for submitting to?
Great. I'll answer the second one first, and we'll go back to the rights. So there's basically three ways I recommend you guys get involved and find music libraries. Number one, you can do your own research. You can go to Google, Bing, Yahoo. You type in something like production music library, TV film library, sync licensing library, any combination of all those terms, and you will find a good number of them that are just right there on Google. Couple issues with that, though. You're not going to find every library because libraries are more in the business of being reaching out to clients and not necessarily being discoverable by producers. So they're not always, just because they're a music library doesn't mean they're also great at SEO, right? Getting their website discoverable on search engines. So you'll find a few, but you will not find a comprehensive list. So I've created a couple resources through Sync My Music to help you guys find those companies. So the second method would be a music library directory, which I do have, and that has 300 companies with their emails, contact information, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff. So you can basically skip all that research process trying to find them yourselves. You'll basically just have it in one PDF and you can kind of go through them. But with that, you will have to do your own research. As I said before, you got to go check out their placements, go listen to their music, find out where you think you would fit in. So there's still a little bit more work to do. It's not like I'm doing all your work for you. And then the third tier, where I do actually the most work that I can do for you, I have a program called Sync Edge. And that's the program where I basically give you my personal library recommendations, the ones that I feel are the strongest, that have the best reputations, that have the best placements. And also I'll tell you in that service is what I call a golden zone of opportunity. What that is essentially a style of music that they currently have. They have some of it in their catalog, but not tons and tons of it, right? It's not so saturated that your 10 tracks will get lost in 1,000 others. But that music can be placed and has a track record of getting placed by their recent clients and their recent placements, right? Because again, if they're making a bunch of reality TV shows and you want to send them some trailer music and they have no trailer music, you're like, well, I'm going to be their only trailer guy, so I'll get tons of placements, right? Well, look at their client list. If they have no trailer clients and they're not getting trailer music placed anywhere, yeah, they might like your music, but are you going to get those placements? So it's not necessarily about being the only person making a certain type of music. It's really making sure that, again, it's licensable and it's useful for them. Okay. So those are the three things. You can learn about those. You can learn about those on my YouTube channel or just check out my website, syncmymusic.com. You can kind of figure out more about those if you want to. But the rights, that's a great question. And this is what scares off more people. So I might hopefully scare off half of your other subscribers right now with this. So there is a big chunk of your rights that gets transferred over to a library when you partner with them. Okay. So every library is different. So some of them will want to do a kind of a work for hire thing where they want to buy you out and take the track completely. But all the time, almost every time, I would say, they're going to still allow you to keep your writer share. Okay. If you guys are not aware, when you earn royalties, basically in anything with music, there are two sides to your royalties, right? There's the publishing side and then there's the writer share. Okay, so you as the producer, as the creator of the music, you should be earning 100% of that writer share unless you co-wrote with somebody, and then you got this 50-50 split, right? But you should be getting, that's basically half of your income is this side of it. Now, the library, 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask for the publishing, okay? That's what gets a lot of producers and musicians scared because they're like, I've heard you never sign up your publishing. I heard that's selling your soul to the devil. I've heard this, I've heard that. Okay, here's why I've been selling and transferring my publishing over to libraries for years. I've never lost an ounce of sleep over it. I've never felt like I sold my soul. I never felt like this was a terrible move for my career. Because for me, personally, what was my publishing doing for me sitting here by myself? I owned my publishing before I sent it over to a library. So what was that publishing that I owned doing for me? Nothing. It was literally doing nothing. I owned it, but I owned 100% of a grape. That's what I was owning, okay? When I go to a library that can get me income and get me placements and obviously exposure, which is cool too, I feel like I'm giving up 50%, but I'm going to get 50% of a watermelon, right? So which one do you want? Do you want half of a huge, massive watermelon that can feed you? Or do you want 100% of your grape that's sitting there doing nothing for you? So that's for me why it made sense to go enable and empower people to go shop my music for me while I'm working on music and while I'm sleeping and while I'm not even thinking about sync licensing. I've partnered with so many people at this point that I have people around the globe getting me placements that I've never met. I'll probably never know their names, most of them. But because of the arrangements and the agreements that I've signed up, people are pitching my music. Of course, others as well, but I am in these catalogs that are getting pitched. And guess what? I don't have to pay them. I don't have to say, hey, please go, I'll pay you a monthly fee. Go pitch my music, go do that. No, they don't get paid unless I get paid. It's a partnership, right? So that's one of those things where it takes a little different thinking, right? Because a lot of producers and musicians, they get scared when they hear this kind of stuff. So if that freaks you out, no problem. Maybe this is not a right fit for you. If you're open to that, if you feel like, you know what, I do own 100% of my publishing, but it's not making me any money. It's not getting me much exposure. So why not give it a shot? Why not let a library take the publishing and see what they can do with it? So you got to just make that choice for yourself and what you're comfortable with. But it is one of those things you need to be aware of before you get started here.
Man, you're just like taking the blanket off of things right now. It's awesome. So the question that I have then is, what is the difference between licensing and publishing?
Okay, so the way that because those words can be used in so many different ways. I understand like the terms here are very, very confusing. Here's how I understand those and how to make sense of it. So publishing is the big umbrella that you can do a lot of things with your music with, right? So you can make, back in the day, I don't know if they still do this, but sheet music, you can publish literally sheet music. You can obviously put it out on the radio. You can basically anything you can think of with your music, you can literally publish it. Publishing is essentially the act of doing something with your music, like monetizing it in some way, lending it to somebody, putting it in certain forms, all that kind of stuff, right? And there's so many different ways that you can monetize your music with your publishing. Sync licensing is one of those avenues within publishing. Okay, so if you're signed to a publisher, so they might try to pitch your music to songwriters. Let's say you're a songwriter, right? And you've got some music. So a publisher might not only pitch your music to other artists and say, hey, you got to record this guy's song. It's really great. It's going to be a hit. But they also might send it to a music supervisor and say, hey, you got a cool TV show. We think this would be a good fit for your show. So licensing is just another one of the little pieces of pie in the greater one of publishing. So it's just one additional avenue that you can pursue. When you get working with libraries, though, it is basically exclusively all about TV film licensing, though. So even though the library acts as a publisher, they're not going to pitch your tracks. It could happen, but it's very rarely. Probably not going to happen. They're not going to go pitch your tracks to artists or try to do other things with their music. They only have so many hours in the day. Their only specialty, their only niche is really trying to get your tracks placed on TV shows, movies, and commercials. So when you follow the path that I've gone, you really are 100% committed to sync licensing. Now, a lot of you guys, if you are artists, if you have you have a fan base and you're trying to basically get some public kind of thing going on, what I recommend you do is probably create separate catalogs if you want to do licensing as well. So you have your artist catalog, you have your artist music that's just for your fans, it's for the public, it's for your social media, all that good stuff. You do your music videos, right? And then you maybe want to create separate music only for sync licensing, because some libraries will not want to distribute your tracks if it's publicly available. They might want to have exclusive control because they don't want their clients to be able to get your music elsewhere. They want to tell their clients, hey, if you sign with us, you get this awesome artist tracks or this producer's tracks, and they're not available anywhere else online. You have to sign with us to get this awesome music. So not every library is like that. Some of them are cool with you having public available tracks, but some of them will have an issue with that. And I know a lot of artists, they don't want to maybe have their fans know that they're doing sync licensing. They kind of want to keep their brand separate. And that would be another way to do that. You can use a pseudonym. You can use a different name. You can completely just keep it like hush-hush, like basically just between you and the library. And it can start to become a secondary source of income for your artist career.
So would you recommend then actually having your music copyrighted beforehand, or not? Don't do any copywriting until they get a hold of it?
Yeah, copywriting is interesting. So copyright, you actually create a copyright the minute your music is in any tangible form. So a lot of people think that sending your music to the Library of Congress is actually creating a copyright. It's actually not. You are the copyright creator. So if you have a DAW session and your track has been composed, that is your copyright. If you've bounced it into an MP3 or you put it on, well, they used to have CDs, but you put it on, your phone, a digital format, anything like that, that is a copyright. So the question then I'm guessing is, do you need to submit your tracks to the Library of Congress before you go off to a library? Now, I have never personally done that ever. Okay, it's expensive. First of all, they charge, I think it's, $30 or $40 per song. So it's a really expensive endeavor to do. And for myself, when I work with libraries, essentially what I'm doing is, it depends. Some of them you're transferring your rights over. Others, you have a different sort of situation. But for me, it never made sense to do that, mostly because the chances of things being stolen or ripped off or copied, are very, very low. And the reason why I've made sure that that's a case for me is that I do not use pre-made loops. Okay. And this is a big issue that I got into on my channel last year, where if you're going to something like Splice, which I love Splice, but there was a big problem with a lot of producers going, hey, I want to make a track and I'm going to go find the pre-made, it's like basically a production pack. I'm going to go get the pre-made chord progression, a pre-made lead, and pre-made drums. I'm going to just download those all, stack them up in my session, call that a track, send it to a library. Big problems can happen, even though you're allowed to legally do that. Even though Splice's terms of service allow you to do that, the problem is that artists or other producers who can do the exact same thing, because it's literally just a couple of clicks of buttons, they can then go make a claim on you and say, hey, you stole my track. I put this track out and I did this. And I've actually had a library buddy of mine basically have a fraudulent lawsuit of somebody saying exactly that. And you definitely don't want to get stuck in that kind of crap. So the more that you just create your own original music, and if you're going to use samples, just use like the one shots and, reconfigure them and get the sort of, whatever you need to do to, pitch them or do whatever you want to do to them. But stay away from definitely melodic loops or lead loops that have a recognizable melody, unless you're going to really seriously alter them and reverse them and change the sound and add some plugins or do something completely different, because that's how you're going to get in trouble in this business, is having sounds that can be so easily duplicated by other people. Okay, so
he's already touched on so many things here. My head's swimming right now. One of the things, though, that you sort of have kept touching on that I want to make sure that we get this question in before we let you get back to your day is, so you've talked a lot about making sure that a track is licensable. I would like for you to sort of break down what makes a song licensable and how, because I noticed I signed up not too long ago just out of interest for SongTrader because I was starting to get interested in sort of this sync licensing type of thing. But I noticed immediately there were some terminologies I needed to know about that aren't necessarily broadly talked about out there. So for one, what does making a song licensable mean to you? And then for two, I noticed that they were wanting instrumental placement, 30-second intros, 30-second outros. How do you structure a song to get the most out of it when you do submit it?
Great question, man. And a very, very deep, complex question. It's probably something I can't go into every detail in one answer, but I can tell you a couple of key things that'll help you sort of make sure that you are on the right track. So the first thing is, you always think about okay, so why would let's do a commercial, like a car commercial. I did a Ford commercial many years ago, and they were showing off this futuristic technology that they had, like a, automatic rear sensing something or other, right? And so they reached out and they said, hey, we want to get some tracks. We want to put something behind this really, futuristic looking technological car commercial we're putting together. So what is the main thing that they want from a track? Why do they want music? Why not having no music, right? How come music is literally on everything on TV, right? What's the one thing about music that always draws all of us? It's emotion. There's an emotion that comes through music. So tapping into the emotion that's being requested of you is the whole thing. That's the whole name of the game, is when they say they want, for that example, they want it to sound futuristic, sleek, safe, comforting, modern, right? These are not necessarily emotions, actually. Some of them are just kind of like adjectives and just descriptors. So how do you take that weird set of words and translate it into sound, right? That's the whole name of the game with this whole thing. Because what we do here is we create production music. We're not here. This is another reason why a lot of people, don't want to do this. We're not here always to express our own inner soul, right? And what's going on in our lives and our emotions. In fact, it's almost rarely ever that case. Most of the time, what we're doing is somebody's telling us we are looking for a particular emotion, and we need you to deliver us that emotion in song or in structure or in music format. Okay, so that's where I can't get into all those nitty gritty details in this answer, but I can tell you a couple of things in terms of structuring your tracks. With licensing, production music, it's all about the build. Your music and your song always needs to build, okay? If you have a second verse, it better not be a copy and paste of the first verse. We've already heard that, and they've already got a copy and paste button. If they want more of that first verse, they can replace it and duplicate it 16 times. You don't need to give them more of that, okay? So when we go to that second verse, we need to add a new lead. We need to change up the drums. We need to make it sound like it's progressed somewhere else, right? And also, as we just move on, probably every 4 to 8 bars, we need to have something added into the track. So you find this a lot with orchestral music, is that, you'll start with just sort of like a simple, maybe just a string, like staccato strings, and then you'll have the horn kind of go on top, and then suddenly the drums start coming in, and then you got a piano lead, and then you got this really cool thing building, right? It's like evolving as it goes forward. And the reason why that works so well is that it's keeping your interest there. It's keeping your like curiosity, like, ooh, so it's like you're seeing one pattern. That's how I see music. I see one pattern playing, and then you see this other pattern playing on top of it, and then you see this next pattern playing on top of that one. And you see this really cool, complex pattern start all singing together, and it's like, wow, this is starting to get really interesting. So making sure that your track constantly builds and evolves, and then obviously having the last 30 seconds or so of your track be the most epic, the loudest, the most impactful part of your track. So almost like your entire track can be kind of like one big crescendo. That's the most common format that I've seen. In terms of the 30-second cut downs, 60-second cut downs, there are so many different types of formats that libraries request from you. I can tell you the more common ones that I've seen in my career are they want a 60-second, a 30-second, a 15-second, and a sting. So sting is usually 5 seconds or less, really, really quick. Then they'll also want what is known as alt mixes or alternative mixes. A lot of times those can be, they want a version with no leads on the track. They want another version with just drum and bass, nothing else in it. Every library, of course, will have different requirements. So I'm not telling you to do this and then send it to a library and say, well, Jesse said this is what everybody wants. No. You got to ask the library, what do you guys need? What are your requirements? That kind of thing, because everybody has different needs. But you will be responsible to supply those different assets along with your full mix when you partner with the library, for sure.
Awesome, man, alive, dude! You have just completely knocked it out of the park. Every single question you've over delivered on, and I have a sneaky suspicion that inside the sync community, inside the syncmymusic.com community, I guarantee that he's probably more than likely over delivering there as well. So, which brings up the next thing that, because we are approaching our hour mark here, and I promised him that I try to keep him under that. So where can they get a hold of you? Where can they find out more about syncmymusic.com?
Absolutely. Obviously, just coming to the website if you'd like to. My YouTube channel is probably a great place for anybody that just wants to. I put out videos every week, twice a week, and I do have a podcast as well. But I think the YouTube channel is probably the best place for people just to kind of get familiar and acquainted with me and what I teach and what this whole business has to offer. If you have a direct question and like something that I talked about here, you want to have something, you want me to kind of advise you on or whatever, just email me. My email is Jesse, Jesse, at syncmymusic.com. So you feel free to email me anytime. I'm really quick with email. I get back to people pretty much almost within 24 hours all the time. I'm kind of addicted to my email. I need to actually stop. I just love talking to you guys. I love answering, helping in any way I possibly can. But yeah, check out the YouTube channel. It's just Sync My Music. You'll see some really cool, valuable stuff. I release a lot of great stuff there. I've also released on my channel, the Sync Academy is my sort of like exclusive community. That's the premium community where you do need to pay if you want to be a part of it. But I do occasionally release some of the tutorials that I release in Sync Academy on my YouTube channel. And so definitely check those out because I think a lot of those are very useful. And what I'm getting into now lately, which is like, we won't get into this now, but I'm really getting into more of the psychology of success because, learning the technical stuff, like what we talked about today, is really pretty much all the technical stuff, right? Like how to craft tracks, how to partner with libraries, how to research, analyze stuff. Believe it or not, that might seem overwhelming because maybe this is new to you guys. That's actually the easy part. The harder part is what you're doing to yourself subconsciously, sometimes consciously, like how you're thinking about yourself, how you're thinking about your chances of success, what story you're telling yourself about getting involved with this. So I'm getting into some really interesting topics now in terms of getting your mind right for this kind of stuff, because like I said, it's so ripe for burnout. I mean, it's so hard for this business that if your mind isn't really, really healthy and really strong, you're going to feel defeat. And Lord knows, us producers and musicians, like we just get kicked all the time. Like we don't make money. We don't, and nobody really values what we're doing. And a lot of times we're like the only ones believing in ourselves. So we're no strangers to like struggle, right? And pain and all that kind of stuff. So, just having, and I want to be definitely a champion of musicians and producers to say, It's really up to you though. Like, you're not a victim of anything. Like, yeah, you might have not, gotten the opportunity that you wanted from this company or that company, or maybe a library will not respond to you, or maybe they'll just flat out reject you. But you don't have to be a victim, actually. Claiming the victimhood and saying, well, it's, woe is me and it didn't work out for me. That's you doing it to yourself. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm trying to teach the community that I'm in charge of right now is how to get rid of that sort of self-defeating attitude and those mindsets and those sort of just, stories that we tell ourselves. They're really, really harmful for our careers and for our just mental health. So check out that stuff on the YouTube channel. I think you guys will like it.
Awesome. That's along the same lines of sort of where I've been being directed myself here. I just recently released a podcast episode called Musicians and Depression, and I have got so much great feedback from that, just from people reaching out and saying, man, you spoke right to me. And another thing that I want to touch on here is the thing that I always tell people who submit music to the monthly song contest or anything like that. One of the main reasons why I pick it, and it's crazy that he's just said this, or maybe it's not, is what usually helps me to connect with the song that I choose as the winner is also how does it emotionally affect me? And so what he's just touched on is like it right along the same lines of everything that we've been talking about here on this channel for the last 6-7 years. So Jesse, thank you so much, man, for coming on. I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you. I would like to see maybe a follow-up to this maybe later on down the line or something like that. But thank you so much for taking out of your day to give us some time here to talk about this stuff. If you guys go and check his website out, if you sign up for the Sync community, let him know that Robert sent you and show him some love. So Jesse, thank you so much, man, for being on today.
Thank you, Robert. It was a pleasure, man. Good to meet you. And thanks to all you guys that showed up here. Yeah, I love it, man. And you're absolutely right. Music is all about the emotions. So if you guys are ready to, put your emotions out there in that format, it's a beautiful, awesome, wonderful business to be a part of. And I wish you guys all the best of luck in any path or any direction you guys choose to go in. So thank you so much for having me today.
We'll talk to you later, Jess.
All right, man. Definitely. We'll do a follow-up.
Awesome. Bye-bye.